Leaders, real life leaders.
I'll let my own team write their own standard operating procedures. In other words, hey, what do I expect from you? So if they make it up, it feels better to them instead of me making it up and making them do it.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Real Life Leadership Podcast, where we share real life stories from real life leaders to help you become a better leader in your organization. And we are so excited. We have Ray Gessner as our guest host, and he has a business called A Step in Time, and he's got this great jingle, kind of like I do, but his is a step in time, step in time. We'll have to, Josh will put that in there, but his website is chimneysweep.com. Ray, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be here. It's a great place you have here. It's a wonderful area.
And we always have Heather Rimmick, who is an amazing leader with us.
Hello, everyone.
All right, today's show is called Trust But Verify. And I want to tell you where I got this story from. So my mom, my dad passed away and my mom got remarried to a guy named Burl. And one time we were at dinner and some girl texted Verl, like, you know how you could see on the phone, like Ashley texting or whatever. And so my mom, before she could even read it, she snatches it and she's like, now who is Ashley? And I was like, Mom, golly. I was like, you don't trust Verl? She was like, oh, I trust, but verify. And so she uses that all the time now. So it's kind of like a joke in our office.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, we trust, but verify.
Right.
So what kind of stories can you guys think of where you actually need to do this? Trust, but verify.
Yeah, so we have one recently that, a lot of our systems they verify everything for us. We don't want to have to go in and count numbers. So basically, our managing partners are required to make so many calls a week, recruiting. That's how their jobs gets going. It's how they recruit for their offices. So we said, okay, everyone needs to recruit 100, make 100 contacts a week. And everyone was like, yeah, I'm making 100 contacts a week. Oh yeah, 150, 200. And so we were like, okay, great. But then, we weren't quite seeing that increase in agent production. So
yeah, we weren't seeing the agents come in and we were like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Either you're not making the calls or you're just terrible at converting.
Right.
One of the two is going on.
Yeah. So we made this really awesome system where we were like, okay, great. I'm so glad you're making your 150 calls. So I want you to make a note in there each time, and that's going to make a tally mark so I can see how many you're actually making. And coincidentally, there was like not 100 calls in there. So that's where we trusted them, but we were going to verify how many they were making.
And a lot of times it's not like they were lying, but they were like, in their mind, they're like, yeah, like I think I made 100 calls. Like it's, they weren't counting them, right? So they were like, yeah, it felt like 100, even though it was actually probably 50.
Right. Yeah.
So when you have something to verify that, what about you, Ray?
I think our office has a trust and verify type of operation. So our office is awesome, I think. And I've got nice people in the office who answer the phones. And key importance of the office is it's always just be friendly. Talk to the customers and be very friendly. So how we verify, though, is that we will take and monitor every phone call using a program called CallFire. It tapes all the conversations and essentially it will spot check. And so let's say that there's a customer who calls up and says, hey, I want to have my chimney cleaned and it's going to be done between 12 and 2. And the office person had scheduled it in between 2 and 4. The person swears that they had it between 12 and 2, and the office person says, hey, I swear it's between 2 and 4. So you just pull up the telephone conversation, listen to it. If you want to send it to the customer, it's fine too, but it's like telling them, hey, look, you know what? It's quality control, and if you listen to them and they're nice and happy and friendly, then it's great. But if you hear a person who's upset and say, I want to speak to a manager, this person has been rude to me or something like that, then you pull up the conversation and boom, you got the information.
And any large company, if you think about it, you always see something that says, this call will be monitored for quality control.
May be recorded to ensure awesomeness.
So ours is
Yeah.
a little bit different. Ours says this call will be monitored to ensure awesomeness. And that's actually Heather's voice on there.
It's just to, it's like a culture thing. We are a fun place to work. And so we wanted to convey that to the client the very first time they call in. Like, it's not just this call will be recorded to ensure quality. Yeah. We're like, this call will be, to ensure
That's a
awesomeness.
great idea. I think I'll use that.
Yeah, and it is.
Yeah.
You want to, that just puts a smile on the person's face before they even talk to someone. And it's really important to do that.
So also on this, I've used it even on giving bonuses. So a client calls up our office and they will say, hey, I'm interested in having a chimney cleaned and inspected. So these people answering the phones, it's called a landing ratio. So a good landing ratio is about 80%. So if they call up and they land and they say, I want to have a chimney cleaned or inspected, and they land, and that's 1 point. If they didn't land, it's 0. So add up all the ones and the zeros, and you get a percentage of landing. If it's 80% or higher, hey, they're doing a great job. If it's under 70%, it's sometimes not so good. But each person gets a landing ratio, and then they can increase it every month, or they can get bonuses if they land it. I mean, all you got to do is be friendly, and people want to schedule with you.
Right.
Well, I would say another one that we do, we record our calls as well, and we monitor. We can't, with the number of calls we get, we can't monitor every single one and check them, but we do check a good amount of the ones that we do. But a couple of them would be like where the agent, we have an inside sales department, and then we have our agents. And so the inside sales department might say one thing, and then the agent says something else. So give an example of that.
So here's what happens a lot. So the client will call in and they'll say, the inside sales agent will say, hey, we can set you up for, do you want to see the property on Saturday at 2? And they're like,
sure, that sounds fine. Yeah, I'll see you Saturday at 2.
and then our agent calls to introduce themselves. Hey, I'm just calling. My name's Heather, and I just wanted to tell you I'm really excited to meet you on Saturday at 2. And the client says,
I never set an appointment with you guys. I told them I didn't want an appointment.
so the agent's like, okay. So then they come and they're like, inside sales said there's an appointment and this person didn't want it. So then we can pull up that call, let them hear it, and then you can see what the real story was, which is, kind of similar to kind of what you're doing there with that. So, yeah.
And a lot of people say, we say trust but verify, which I like that better. And then they say, have you heard of people say, inspect what you expect? So how do you think those two are different?
Well, I think that they're different because when you're trusting someone and you're just verifying, did they do it properly? That's a little bit different than inspecting what you expect. Expectations of their job, that's kind of like our report cards, right? So we're inspecting each month what we expect out of them. So it's an easy way to kind of look at it and say, this is what we expect you to do, and let's measure up how you did it. And a difference of, did you do this task, and I'm just going to kind of verify that you did it properly.
Yeah, and if you haven't listened to our podcast, we talked about this in depth, go back and listen to. We have one that's called What Does Winning Look Like? And that is just so important, but you want to make sure that your expectations are clearly defined, and then you're inspecting them. So what would you say are some different things you do, Ray, that you're inspecting what you expect?
So here's the things that I enjoy doing. So let's say, every company has their great technicians or great sales agents or great employees, whoever they are. Every company has a great one, and every one of them, has some and need improvement. Mm-hmm. So how we'll do it is take the best ones you've got, and then have everyone else go and figure out what they're doing. Example is that call idea. So if you've got somebody who's got a high landing ratio, let's say 80 or 90%, then take all their phone calls and let all the other people who are answering phone calls take and listen to it, and find out how this person is doing so well. And I've got another example that...
And so that would be, if you looked at that what you would say to the person is, listen, just so you know, we're going to be monitoring X number of calls for you out of your calls, out of your, like our inside sales department knows we're going to be monitoring at least, 8 out of 20 calls that they make, and they have to be graded. And this is some of the things they're graded on.
Yeah, so we look at 5 things. We love acronyms here. So we use one called CLICKS, and we look at these 5 areas. So what we expect them to do is to hit these 5 points on a call, get their contact information, get the lead source, find out
how they heard about us.
Right, how they heard about us. I is their interest, like what type of property are they looking for, or what are they trying to sell? Q is qualify, like are they qualified, get them with the lender. And then S is set that appointment. And so we expect them to hit all 5 of those, and we inspect it by random spot checking several calls that they do and
we
see if
grade
they hit
those
them. And we grade
calls.
them. Yeah, they get like a 1 through 5. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. What about some of our other things that we do that kind of inspects, that we can give real practical ideas of things that we inspect?
Well, one thing that we do, a really well-run company runs off of checklist. And so checklists are a great way to inspect what you expect. So we have everything from an opening checklist to a closing checklist. And that means like we expect when somebody walks into our office that the lights are on, that it has the Chantel Ray smell, that everything's put away orderly, that water's filled up, etc. So we have a quick, easy checklist to make sure that the BOA, when they come in the morning, has filled out all of that stuff. So it's an easy way for us to check it. It's also trusting and verifying. So we trust that they're going to do that every morning, but we get that quick email that says they filled out this checklist to verify that they did it. Do you guys have different things like that?
Yep. Our chimney technicians have a series of photographs they take. So they'll go out there and they'll inspect the firebox, a damper, the chimney cap, the flue liner, the chimney flashing, the brickwork, all these different little spots that they've got to inspect. All right, and they'll take pictures and email them to our office. Our office will quality control it, but they also email it to the client, and that way the client has records of everything we've inspected also. So it is expecting our technicians to give these series of photographs, and we inspect it from our office.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. So we had this great checklist, and I will put those in the show notes of exactly the opening checklist and the closing checklist. And when you see them, you're literally going to be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that this is on the checklist. But if you look at really high level companies, they have the most basic things on that checklist. And so we started going to different companies like Chick-fil-A and Geico and just all these high, large companies and going, let's examine. They let us come in and see what they were doing. And that's what they did. I mean, you would think that they're like stupid, but they're not.
Because people may be thinking like, okay, you're a little controlling. Like you're literally making them check off a box that says they turned on the lights. But we want to make the jobs as easy as like if a 16-year-old were coming off the street.
We say a 17-year-old or a 70-year-old.
Yeah.
We want to make it as easy as a 17-year-old can do it or a 70-year-old can do it.
Right. And this just ensures that they're not missing anything. So
which that's going to be, that 17-year-old and the 70-year-old, that's going to be a podcast all on its own.
Right.
We're going to go over that. But let's talk about what would you say is the line that you cross between controlling and verify? Like here's verify. Well, let's use my mom's example. What would be the line between verifying and controlling?
I would say which you can, not that I know from experience, but you can set it up to where you get a copy of every single message. Like that's controlling. Right?
Yeah, that's a bit
you
much.
You crossed the line at that point.
Yes.
Verifying is, it's okay to pick up the phone and do a weekly check-in on your significant other's messages just to kind of say, okay, I'm just verifying everything's legit here and going on.
What do you think?
It's difficult. So it is difficult to be controlling and also verifying. How I usually do it is I don't want to be the bad guy. So I will have different levels of people in place. And so I'll have a manager. It's manager's job of being the bad guy, so forth. And then he'll go through and do his things. And then if there's a problem, then it can escalate up to me. But typically, I'll let my own team write their own standard operating procedures. In other words, hey, what do I expect from you? They'll go through and make up, all right, here's the things that ought to be inspected. So if they make it up, it feels better to them instead of me making it up and making them do it.
Well, they have ownership. Yeah, because they have ownership in what their expectation was.
Right.
Yeah. And then it's easy for you to kind of verify that.
And that's a great way to get, if you don't have these checklists in place, you have them write down, okay, what is it that you're doing every day? And then start going through and say, okay, what's missing from that list?
Right. Same with job descriptions. Like, a lot of times we will, even when we have them, we'll have periodically people in those positions rewrite their job descriptions just to make sure we're covering everything so that they have a clear expectation of what they expect, so that when we go through and say, hey, we're going to look at how you did this past month at your job, at your expectations, you know, when we're inspecting it, they also have a very clear picture of what they're expected to do.
So I will give you an example of some of the things that are on the checklist, but like one of them, ironically enough, is the check the poopery.
Very important.
Very important.
Yes.
And believe it or not, okay, because we have bathrooms that it's like a single bathroom, and so people, I mean, when you poop in there and then you leave, I mean, it's funky if you don't have any kind of spray. And so that even the people want it, like the agents want it, because if they poop,
well,
they
one
want it
time
to
we tried to make our own and they like revolted. They were like,
that poopery is so expensive. We tried to create our own version of it, and they were like, absolutely not.
Yes.
Please get the poopery back ASAP.
Yeah.
But so like one of the examples is to make sure you've got not just one poopery.
Yeah.
You've got a backup of the poopery.
Yeah. Do not run out. Yeah. And that's where, you know, some people would say, I don't consider it controlling, because that is something that's a verification. Mm-hmm. Like, you're just helping somebody verify that they've done what they're supposed to each day. When you say, like, let's look at something that's controlling, we have a situation where we kind of were walking the controlling line. So we recently had an event that our agents were doing. And so one of our managing partners said, you know, I got it. I'm going to take care of it. I'll make sure it's fully staffed. So we let him run with it. But as it got closer, we started getting nervous. We were like, do they really have it? What's going on? We haven't heard much about it.
Because it was a very expensive event.
Yeah, and an event that we previously have gotten a lot of good business from. And so we were like, okay, just make sure that he's got, you know, they've got it taken care of. And so we did, and he said, I got it. It's all taken care of. All the shifts are covered. But we went a little bit over the line when we were like, well, we want to know who's at the shifts. Instead of kind of just, we trusted, we verified, but we were little walking that controlling line there.
Yeah, we sure were. But here's the thing. Every time something wasn't done, we went back and added it to the checklist. Yeah. So for example, like, let's say we had a client one time. So we have like kind of like some Biscoff cookies and like gourmet teas at the front for people. And so like one time someone came in and they hit the dispenser for the hot water and it was out of hot water. We were like, somebody better go put that on the checklist, right? Yeah. So that's on the checklist. Is there enough water in the, you know,
the hot water
dispenser? That's one of the things. So anything else that you can think of that they would add to a checklist?
I mean, I think we even have on there, like, is the toilet paper rolls filled? Like, that's how.
And we have extra ones on there.
Because it's really just important. Because when you come in the day, you know, you just kind of get started and get going, and you forget about certain things. And, you know, the biggest thing for us is client experience, whether they're coming in our office or they're going somewhere else. And so we create all of these to make sure that we're taking our client.
Bathroom and we're out of toilet paper. Yes. That's not a good client experience.
Yeah, so that's why those are really important to us.
Or even like the chairs, putting them back in the office, making sure everything's neat and tidy. And you might have to say, okay, like for us, we've made it so that they really only have to do one in the morning and one in the afternoon. But like, for example, Chick-fil-A and other places, it's monitored every 2 hours.
Like
every 2 hours you check.
Can I talk about something that we used to do?
Yes.
The salad bar.
Oh my God.
Talk about so we used to have a salad bar here, a soup and a salad bar. And it was Mac Daddy. I mean, you were in the salad bar club. Like, if you wanted to come, people like begged to come eat at our salad bar. We literally would have people come in. So we had like a gourmet salad bar and we had soups. And it got to the point where we had a checklist that like every 30 minutes the admin was going and stirring the soup so it didn't get stuck to the bottom of the thing. And we were like, wait, are we running a restaurant or a real estate company
Yes.
here?
And
But we did have to have a checklist like for every bit of that. Otherwise, the soup got burned or someone got food poisoning. I mean, it's just like, those are really, really important. And so in your businesses, you have to think of those things.
And that's on our another podcast. We're going to be talking about, the question is, does it stop production? And that salad bar, 100%, it, wasn't in our wheelhouse, and it absolutely stopped production.
It's a shame.
All right. Well, any last minute thoughts from either of you on trust but verify, or inspect what you expect?
I think it's just accountability, and it helps people really, at first people think that it's like, why aren't you trusting me? Like, why do you have to check on me? But in the end, that accountability is what helps them grow.
Oh man, I'm so glad you said that, because here's the thing. This is what really does happen. With places that don't have that in place, all that does is create frustration. So it's creating expectations up front of what you expect. So like, for example, let's just say you had no checklist on the front and the back, right? What would happen is every day that you went and the tea wasn't filled, or every day you went and the toilet paper wasn't filled, or every day you went and there was no coffee and the coffee wasn't made, then you just get pissed.
Yeah.
I mean, excuse my French, but that's exactly what happens. And then what happens is it builds up and it builds up, and it's like, well, I asked you to do that, didn't you? Oh, I forgot. Well, I asked you to do that. Oh, I forgot. Well, I asked you to do that. I forgot. With the checklist, it's like, okay, this is an expectation. It's part of your job requirement to turn that in every day. Oh, I know I got something. I totally forgot about this. So when we first created our checklist in our system, we didn't have it go anywhere.
Right.
So it was like they were filling out the checklist, but nobody was inspecting whether they were doing the checklist. Right. So then now what it does is that checklist automatically gets emailed to the manager, and then the manager's responsible for making sure. And then we have a manager, we call it a P, but it's the market managing partner, and they oversee to make sure the other managers are looking at the checklist.
Right.
So you've created accountability, essentially. You're making each individual accountable for their actions. That's a great book. It's called Art of War. And how Art of War, this general back in Chinese days, he would take his troops and put one officer in charge of 24 people. So the owner or leader or the king, he would tell the officers, and they would tell the troops, and if the troops did it right, then that's great. The officer gets credit for it. But if he doesn't do it right, then he'll repeat the order, and if they don't do it right after that, he'll cut their heads off.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we should implement. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's how it was.
Yeah.
I mean, back then. So, I mean, think about it. You give an order, and if it's followed, then that's great. But if it's not followed, there's got to be accountability to it.
Well, and I think that another piece to that is, and we are going to have a whole episode just on this, but it's really about the carrot versus the stick.
Oh yeah, that's always a hard one.
And there's always that balance, because you're like, okay, well, do I reward for doing it? Like, okay, every time, if you fix do your checklist every single week, you could get $5 for doing it extra as a bonus, or whatever you decide to do. You could make it such a small bonus, but they want to achieve it.
Right.
So that's one way. Or you could make it as, hey, you got to complete this checklist. If you don't complete the checklist, then you're getting written up. And if you get written up 3 times, well, unfortunately, you won't be employed here anymore.
Right. That's always a hard one.
So it's always looking to see which one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week. Ray, thanks so much for being a guest.
Great to be here.
And Heather, thank you
Thank
as
you.
always.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, Log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.